episode 70 of School Librarians United. I am your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian currently in my 13th year, I found myself asking the question, where's the podcast that will help me do my job? I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, by my interview guests, and the listeners who contact the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast is something for you. Ever since our schools closed on March 13th, and we learned several weeks later that we wouldn't be reopening before the end of the school year, I've known I should do an episode on how school librarians can support our school communities during the COVID crisis. It serves us no good to belabor the point that an untold number of activities will not happen in our libraries this year. Nor would it be useful to attempt to create a resource of all the resources being made available, as that has been growing exponentially and has overwhelmed educators and parents alike. What I wanted was to offer some strategies which could be implemented to support distance learning taking place all over the world, and to provide some sort of virtual extension of our own programs during this time. And to be quite honest, I didn't have an idea of where to start. And then came Angie Miller's article in Knowledge Quest. I know I'm not alone when I say that I have spent more time over the last 4 weeks obsessing over things I've seen on my screen. I've been trying to wrap my head around how I am supposed to do my job now that I am at home. And I have been wrestling with this influx of resources and overwhelmed and both excited that we can offer these to our students and yet feeling so removed from the very kids I work with every day. And also hard is that when I do go on the internet, I am also overwhelmed by all the amazing examples of how many other librarians are stepping up to the plate and they are servicing their students. And I'm just impressed and I'm in awe. And I'm also just a little miserable because I feel like I'm not doing enough to support my kids. I wanted to take this opportunity to share with you an article that brings a smile to my face. It's reassurance and it's encouragement when I get down on myself like this. And it was written by a lovely person named Margaret Sullivan. And she posted a great article on Knowledge Quest on February 26, 2019. And it's titled, Your PLN, Source of Inspiration or Thief of Joy. And I'll include a link in the show notes. This is one you should print out. This is one you should read and reflect because it has a lot of great just advice. Because I think that right now, when we are so besieged with so much that is coming in, and we want to take it all in because as experts on research, and we always research everything, and this means that we are just overwhelmed with a great deal, and quite honestly, probably feeling just a little inept. Margaret talks about how easy it is to look at what others are doing in our PLN and this compare and despair. And while we desperately want to learn from one another, it's hard to do that and not somehow feel bad about our own programs. But the important thing is to recognize that our schools are unique and the needs of our school community are unique. And also the fact that when people post their successes online, these are their successes. What we aren't seeing are the misses. We're not seeing the mistakes, the trial and errors. We're not learning from their mistakes. We're looking at the end product, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I do want to make sure I include this quote from Margaret's article. Quote, "What's important is that you are making a difference for the students you serve." End quote. And that helps me because I really do put this all into context and realize if at the end of the day, I have helped my students and my staff and my families, that's a win. Now, I'm so excited to be sharing with you this interview with Angie Miller, and Here we go. Angie Miller, thank you for agreeing to be on the podcast. A few listeners had reached out to me and asked if I was going to do a COVID-specific episode. And I was so overwhelmed at the time they asked, and a bit resentful. I'm going to also throw in, I was very resentful when they were asking me, hey, when are we going to do a COVID episode? I'm like, I hate COVID. So I didn't know where to start. So thank you. Thank you for being on the show. Welcome. Listeners, I was inspired to reach out to Angie because of an article that she wrote, posted on April 7th, titled, The School Library is Still Open, 10 Ways to Change Our Physical Spaces into Virtual Libraries. And this was on Knowledge Quest. Friends, I'm going to put a link to this article in the episode. Angie Miller, this is quite a departure from the writing you typically do.
Yeah. So, well, actually, no, it isn't. because, most of the writing I do is about research and librarian leadership. I have found that in the past 3 weeks since I've been working from home, I have been engaged in maybe some of the most research I've had to do for my staff and students. At the same time, I have also had to step up as a school leader. So it might initially feel a little different because it's about how do we keep our libraries open. But in order to keep our libraries open, we have to be researchers and we have to be leaders. So I don't think it's not that different.
And I do want to mention, you're an author. Can you tell us a little bit about the book that you wrote?
Yes, I wrote a book called It's a Matter of Fact, and it's about teaching research skills to students. It's primarily focused on grades 7 through 12 because that is my experience as a teacher. And it came out 2 years ago, this week, actually, I think, based on my Facebook memories. And it's just about how we engage in meaningful research in the classroom, from the library. And it really I actually had this idea a few years ago. And then after the 2016 election, I actually scrapped everything I had written and rewrote it for my editor because I realized that research is an act of citizenship. It's an act of democracy. And I was really focusing on, fake news and, sort of viral things that have teeth that aren't accurate. And we see that now with COVID-19 as well. So I feel like I've come full circle where research is still an act of, public health at this point.
Yeah, you're very on trend. You are very on trend. Friends, I'm going to include a link, an Amazon link to Angie's book so you can look into the description. And again, like you say, I mean, it especially with the 2016 election, and then we come back to, and these are things for which sloppy information can be incredibly tragic. And so you're absolutely right. Dealing with political fallout is a lot different than dealing with the ramifications of misinformation being perpetuated largely through social media too, just because it's so easy. Let's pivot. I do want to hear about your library. So before we start talking about going virtual, tell me about your library, your program, and let us know what regular life looks like for you.
So I was a classroom teacher for 13 years, and I was looking for more of a leadership opportunity. I was the 2011 New Hampshire Teacher of the Year. And through that, I had just been so fortuitous to receive a lot of amazing professional development that focused on leadership. But as I started looking at moving into administration, I realized that sort of the higher up you go, the less contact you have with students. And that was the part that breathed life into my day, right? Like I didn't want to lose contact with kids. And so I became a librarian, long story short. I became a librarian because I recognized this leadership opportunity. And I jokingly with a friend say that I'm like a subterfuge administrator. Like I breathe ideas into the administration's head and then just sit back and watch them come to fruition because I have ears to the ground. I know what my teachers are doing and thinking. And I have this, we, not just me, librarians have this more global view of the school than any other educator in the building does.
Well, and I do see that, especially at the elementary school, because I'll work with every student every week. And you do sort of have your ears to the ground when it comes to appreciating what's happening, not just with our fifth grade team, but also with our pre-K and with our preschoolers, and what's happening with our third graders. And so we've always been bigger picture. I think I remember being the idea of the teacher being sort of the egg crate that we each sort of teach in our own little rooms, and the door is closed. And even when the door is open, we're sort of so hyper focused on that particular grade level that we have a much bigger perspective. I completely agree, but we do come at this from a perspective. I also find that some of us in our profession, I travel. So I have the benefit of being part of four buildings and have almost a district perspective. So it does help me. It makes my email box a nightmare, but yes.
Yeah, we're the only educator in the building who knows every child. So I'm in a 712 building, and I know every kid.
I remembered it at field day. They sort of put me sort of in the mix, and it was very comfortable for me because I knew all the students. And I looked at a couple of the fifth grade teachers going, I don't know most of these kids. I won't know them till they're mine.
Right.
So I was like, oh, that's true. I guess that is very much the case. So I got to ask, can you give us an idea of the size of your school? So you said you're 7 through 12. How many students would you say?
We live in a rural area. It's a really interesting area because we live on Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire, which is an incredibly wealthy, touristy town. However, my students do not live on the lake, right? Mitt Romney lives on the lake. My students work the farms, the ice cream stands, the landscaping. And so I think we're 35% free and reduced lunch, Title I. And so we have about 500 students, grades 7 through 12. So not very big. And and we're also in the heart of, the opioid issues in New Hampshire. So yeah.
Well, and recognizing the socioeconomic perspective that many of your students are living amongst probably gives you a better appreciation of how your collection should be servicing the needs of your students and should be addressing many of the issues that your students might see in their friends' lives or relatives' lives. And so I think that has to be acknowledged in a program such as yours that services all the students in your building.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, that's pertinent. It's really important. Before we focus on this conversation, school librarians are incredibly resilient, and we tend to support the ever-changing needs of our school communities, such as you've said. But the COVID pandemic has really overwhelmed us all. I mean, how have you? We're about 4 weeks into this. How do you think your particular situation as the librarian has sort of unfolded?
So I think, I too was overwhelmed. And part of that goes back to when I did come into the library. I adopted a library that really needed a lot of work, and so my first year, I really focused on physical space. and making it comfortable and accessible and equitable for everybody. And so when that is your focus, and then that space is, you're robbed of it, basically. Like those doors have to close, that's like losing part of your identity. And so there was great loss in that beginning. How do I still contact my students? But then I really had to think about, like, what is our program, right? It's not just the comfy chair or the big round table or the laptops. Like, our program is about leadership. It is about outreach. It is about accessibility. So what does that look like?
Well, and I think that I often break this up into three, because I think, like you said, being robbed of our space. Our physical space is a resource. Our collection, be it physical print materials, technology or digital resources, that's another component. And then you, the librarian, are a resource. So if you take away the physical space, we now have to focus on you as the resource. And I think that's where we've heard repeatedly that librarians, this is our opportunity to shine. And I've heard that repeated many times, because if you do take us out of our space, now our space is not the focus of what we provide, and our print collection is not the focus of what we provide. It's our leadership and the skills that we bring, our technology skills, our skills as research experts, and how we guide this aspect of what we do with our buildings. Go piece by piece with your article. And friends, I printed up this article, and I'll be the first one to say I was doing a little checklist. And I want to recommend listeners, when you go through this article, let's recognize that all of our library programs are different. Our communities we serve are different. And expect to modify and adapt the things that Angie has talked about in her article to your own circumstances and grade level appropriateness. So, Angie, let's start off with your first strategy, and that is to build a virtual desk.
Yes. So when I started thinking about what does this look like, right? And I want to go back to where you said librarians are resilient. If you think about librarians who have sort of balked at changing into learning communities, and then those librarians have made themselves obsolete. And the same thing is happening right now. If we want to kind of like lie down and feel overwhelmed and like we can't do our job because we don't have a physical space, we're making ourselves obsolete in this time period. So that resiliency really, those who are resilient overcome. Right? so we will. So when I started thinking about, okay, when students walk into the library, what is the first thing they do? They tend to come to the desk. And so I realized that our library webpage would be that desk. And so while we typically had like pictures of what was going on and, little links or whatever, I just wiped that front page clean. And I put on four things, that I thought were most important. One, I made a LibGuide for COVID-19, which I think we'll talk about in a minute. Two, I did an ebook, like how do you sign out our ebooks? And then three, I put a book request form. And then four, I did an Ask a Librarian link, which has been the most amazing part.
And I want you to expand on that, because it just almost immediately in the comments in your article was, oh, tell me more about this Ask a Librarian. I know my department chair wants us to start offering an Ask a Librarian sort of office hours. So could you break that down step by step? How does that look like in your district?
So in my district, we have certain hours that all teachers need to be made available. So, and that will, like you said, that's going to change depending on what sort of model your district has developed. And so what I've done is on my webpage, and I use WordPress. So, again, that's going to depend on what landing page you've used. I've just put an Ask the Librarian, the words, and then those are hyperlinked to a Google Meet. And every morning I can go there, click on that, and log in. I mute my camera and I mute my microphone so that I can be working, or my dogs can, I can be talking to my dogs or whatever. But when somebody else joined that, I hear a ding, and I switch over to that page and open it up, and I'm able to talk with those students, teachers, whoever is jumping in, administrators, and give them the help that they need.
Wow. I think that's fantastic. I know that there are some districts that are still using Zoom. I think after about a week and a half, our district shut that down very quickly. So Google Meet has been how we have been doing this. And I like the idea that you can leave it open, but you don't have to be glued to your computer.
Right. And sometimes if I have to run to the bathroom or let my dogs out or, switch the laundry over or whatever, I will turn my camera on and I'll aim it at a little piece of paper that says, "Be right back."
I love that. And there are these kinds of Ask a Librarian services. I know the larger public libraries have, these kinds of services where you can at any time open a chat with a librarian. And I think that there's a great deal of appeal of that. And I know, and I was sort of thinking, actually, I've been supporting my staff remotely for the past 6 years. I work in 4 buildings. And while it's not ideal, it's the job I have. And you make it work because that's what we're resilient. And but most of the time I support my teachers. It is remotely because they email me and they say, "Hey, I know you're not here today, but how do I do this? Hey, Amy, I know you're not here. How do I do this?" And I think that many of us find ourselves in that situation, or it's on the weekend or it's at night and you're like, "I know I shouldn't be checking my school email, but I'm going to." And in my case, because I teach littles, it's usually a parent who's reaching out. So I think in many cases, we're supporting our families, but I do like how you have that on your desktop, sort of your landing page of your website. I beg your pardon. All right, super. So let's talk about your second strategy, be a reliable source of information.
So like I said before, one of the things that I have on my landing page is a link to a LibGuide. And I decided that I wanted to be that researcher in terms of coronavirus/COVID-19. I teach middle and high school, and they all have social media. And prior to us leaving, I was hearing conspiracy theories, students really paralyzed with over-the-top unnecessary fear. I had healthy students from healthy families worried about getting it and not understanding what flattening the curve meant, didn't understand that staying home isn't necessarily about concern for you, it's about concern for the people that you love. And, can I get it at the grocery store? Can I get it at the gas pump? Like lots of questions that our students had. And so I made a LibGuide and I have it by different sections. Some of it has state-specific information, announcements from the government. Some of it is about mental health resources that are available. Some of it is news. I do have a little happy section that I put like John Krasinski's videos on. And but just sort of a place where students can go and remove all the noise.
Well, and I think that even all the more important, your students come to you for answers. And by providing a space on your webpage, this is, I don't want to say kid appropriate, this is for the young adults in your program. They can see information that you've provided for them that is age appropriate. That they'll be able to understand. And the idea is that if they're going to see things, let it hopefully be something which you have carefully researched and you have found something that is appropriate. We struggle at the elementary level trying to find things, and thankfully there are some resources like National Geographic for Kids that have created some explanation videos for kids so that my littles can understand why we aren't going to school. But, you mentioned conspiracies, and, front page of the New York Times today talked about 5G, like cell towers, being attacked because this idea that somehow there's this connection between COVID and the cell phone towers, which I can't imagine anything more problematic during a pandemic than destroying something such as our infrastructure and our communication towers. So, and this is being perpetrated probably not by 7th and 8th graders. This is being done by ill-informed adults who are feeling overwhelmed with misinformation through social media. So I that's fantastic. And I really appreciate where you're coming from with your research, your background in providing research for our students. Let's look at our third strategy, and that is being a book provider, because in our core, that is what drew many of us to this profession.
So being a book provider will definitely vary depending on what building you are in. I know I have a son who's a senior in high school, and his school is completely closed down. The fobs have been, undone, and, teachers have no access. So that librarian cannot go in there. My school has remained open in the sense that if a staff member needs to go in, they can sign in, desanitize, and then get to where they need to go. So what we have done is my para has been going in to help with the school lunches and the delivery process. And so once or twice a week, if students are requesting books, she'll run up to the library, wipe them down, put them in a plastic bag. She handles everything with gloves. And students can either do curbside pickup. A lot of my students have their own cars and they're looking for a reason to get out of the house. So they'll swing by and grab it at the school, or we will deliver it with the lunches. And so it'll be dropped in that cooler, with the food at the end of their driveway.
And there is, I think the jury is out. I think there's a very divided attitude towards providing physical books during this pandemic. But because your school is also providing an essential service, and that is meals for our students, I think that it lends itself to providing these physical books to students. Let's ask, what about and you mentioned this on when you reworked your webpage, providing ebooks and pushing the importance of accessing ebooks during this time.
So yeah, my students tend to prefer the hardcover, the hard copies to the ebooks. So I'm definitely having to sell the ebook thing now, even though we've always had them accessible. So the first thing I did was, when we knew that we were going to be closing, I went down to my business office and I said, can we make sure I have an open PO to Follett, which is where I purchase my ebooks, with, I didn't even specify the money in the budget. I just said, can you just open a PO for me? And she did. And so now if a student needs an ebook or a teacher needs an ebook, I'm able to just log into Tidal Wave, download the book, and not have to go through a lot of rigmarole of red tape and paperwork. And so on the webpage, we just have, how do you sign in? How do you get it, et cetera. I have had students drop in to my Ask the Librarian desk and say, like, Mrs. Miller, I'm having a hard time. And then I'm able to share my screen and show them how to get in and access that.
That's wonderful. I have found, especially, I'm already an audiobook fan. So my love of audiobooks, I have tried to, during the time I was seeing my students, try to encourage them to we use Sora and also Hoopla through our public library. And because we did not have advance notice, our students left empty-handed. The students were given an opportunity to come back to the schools after we had shut down to clear out their lockers, but I never had that last checkout with my students. And so we really are in a situation where ebooks are the only option for us, ebooks and audiobooks. So I have in my webpage tried to create a drop down for ebooks and audiobooks and encourage students to explore those in the little video lessons I'm sending them. Tell us about your strategy number 4, be a part of the assignments.
Yeah, so, I am a teaching librarian, and so I do co-teach with my teachers all the time. I have found in the past that, asking teachers what they need is not good enough. You need to show teachers what you have. And so I just email them. I know you usually do this in the spring. What is that going to look like? Put me on the assignment or whatever. So I have teachers who have me included in their assignments. The link, they put the Ask the Librarian link right there, embedded in the assignment, and my email. I have teachers who add me to their Google Classroom so that I can see what assignments are coming up or whatever and pull together resources. But just because, at school, physically we're separated by hallways and a set of stairs. Now we just need to keep bridging that separation.
Sure. I found I embraced the screencasting, and I talked to my teachers, like you said, for whom I knew we had standing assignments that were coming in the fall, that were coming in the spring. And the reason why is because I've worked with them. We've built that relationship. I know in the spring, the 5th graders do this assignment, the 4th graders do this assignment, the 3rd graders do this assignment. And the nice thing is they're sort of culminating, and I could do screencasts of, hey, friends, if we were all together, this is what I would show you how to use on the school library homepage. And it has been an opportunity to really describe in great detail the databases and, hey, friends, you're doing this research assignment. These are the 4 places I want to see you go to. And then, like you said, talk to your teachers about being on the assignment. So I would have the students' assignment screencasting. And I said, okay, now this is how we're going to do our bibliography and moving those citations into their bibliography page. I know that a lot of parents were watching this assignment with the students, because this is going to be taught at home now instead of being taught at school. Yeah. So tell me about your 5th strategy, and that is running virtual book clubs, because this is on my list of things I don't do, and I don't know how to start.
So I am running 3 book clubs. One is personal, and just I've developed a Facebook group, and I have teachers and librarian friends from around the country. And so we are reading Homegoing, which is a book about Ghana and slavery. And that was actually chosen by my teachers and my staff because I also run a staff book club. And so we are currently reading Homegoing as well. When we got up and left, we were in the middle of doing our book club. We were reading The Tattooist of Auschwitz with grades 9 through 12. And so I just reached out to them, and we've done a couple Zoom sessions to finish up the book. And then right before I left, I had already done the book talk for the next book club, which was No Country for Old Men. So those were ordered, and they actually just came in. And so I've reached out to the students, and we are doing either curbside or lunch delivery for those. And then we'll just continue. Kids will have it. And I've also ordered it on ebook, so if somebody wants to read it, or I have an audiobook as well. And so I still get to see those kids. They're super disappointed because I usually make cookies or banana bread for book club, and they're feeling kind of gypped that they have to bring their own snacks. But
Well, and I think, as I've caught myself saying, we're all in the same boat. This is not a New Hampshire thing. This is not a Metro Detroit thing. This is reaching around the world. And I do think on some level that knowing everybody has felt the impact of this makes it more of, these are sort of manageable disappointments, is the phrase I find myself using. I also have graduating seniors. I have two sons who are finishing up high school, and there are a lot of disappointments, but they're all manageable in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. And a lot of my book club kids are seniors. And so I am trying to just offer them as much normalcy and connection as possible. I miss them so much. And, we've spent 7 years together, or 5 years, 7 through 12. And, I miss them, and I want to be able to see their faces.
Well, I applaud your efforts, because kids who are in book clubs are there because, not just because they love to read, but I'm sure they appreciate your mentorship and your leadership as a familial adult in their lives. Let's talk about communicating, your sixth strategy. I think this takes up a great deal of my time these days, communicating with administration. And we do a lot of this. Yeah. How is it different now as a virtual librarian?
So I think, and I don't want to demean administrators and the jobs that they have, because they're huge. But I think if we actually sat and talked with librarians, there is often a disconnect between what administrators think librarians do and what we actually do. I think everybody would say that. And now we're not even there. And so, we could be doing nothing. And
it's a terrifying thought.
Right?
Yes, it's a terrifying thought.
Yeah. And so I want my administrators not to just know that I'm not doing nothing, but to know that I'm still an integral part of our school community. One of the things that did not come up in my strategies, because it actually transpired after I wrote this article, was I'm also the National Honor Society advisor. And so we were having our first NHS meeting, and my kids said, I said, "Oh my gosh, I haven't seen your faces. How are you doing?" These are all juniors and seniors. And they said, "We're so bored." And these are kids who are accustomed to being involved with school activities from the moment they get up in the morning till the moment they crash at night. And it just was very jarring to me, because I realized we have been so focused, and rightly so, on students who don't have food, who don't have supports at home, so worried about those kids and putting in those safety nets, that we kind of forgot that there's also a group of kids who have a different kind of safety net, and that is being involved with school. And they were like, we miss school so much. We miss student council, we miss NHS, we miss sports, we miss the play, we miss yearbook. And so I said, "Well, do you want to do like an independent study?" And so I worked with guidance, and we put together a genius hour. And we had our first meeting yesterday, and we have kids learning new languages, writing books, designing tiny houses, doing crazy stuff that they're like, we have the time now to do this. And let's be amazing instead of just fine.
Well, and I think the fun thing about that is, I've been hearing from so many people when it comes to self-care, hey, this is the perfect time to invest in something that will feed your soul. And you've done that by creating a genius hour, giving the kids not an assignment per se, but a goal to invest and delve into something that fascinates them. Right. That's wonderful.
And not everybody is there. A lot of people are overwhelmed. A lot of our students are caretakers for younger siblings. This isn't I'm not dismissing any of that, but there is a group of students who is hungry for more. So that goes back to the communicating with administration. It's saying, look, I got these kids. Don't worry about them. Right.
Well, and it's an advocacy component too.
Yeah.
Because we are always, I've said this before, I don't know any complacent librarians because our jobs are precarious enough that we can't afford for us to just sort of sit back and assume everybody knows what we do on a daily basis. But I think that we have a way of making ourselves present in the meetings that our teachers have with their classes, by asking that we be included not just in the assignments, but also in the daily gatherings. So when the teachers are meeting with their students saying, oh, by the way, Mrs. Herman's here today because she's, we would have had library today. And so Mrs. Herman's here today. And I think that when we make that gesture, when we offer that to our buildings, I'm hoping that a handful of teachers and most definitely our administrators recognize that. I noticed I have a YouTube channel, and one of the administrators from one of my buildings, subscribe to my YouTube channel.
Oh, wonderful.
So every time I put up my little screencast videos for each of the grades I teach, he's getting a notification that I've created more YouTubes that I am sharing out with my grade levels. So this is actually a good thing. We can promote the things that we can do under these given circumstances.
I'm sorry, I had one of our administrators sent out an email saying, if you have something cool going on in your classroom, please let me know. I miss seeing kids in the hallways and in your classrooms. And that was a great opportunity for me to say, I don't have any formal classes lined up for this week, but please stop in the Ask the Librarian link because there are teachers and kids in there all the time. And whether he does or not, at least there's a little bit of advocacy that, I'm busy today and tomorrow and the next day. And, I'm working too.
Exactly. The seventh one is going to really be one that people sort of have to navigate because not all of us have paraprofessionals.
Right.
But your seventh strategy is to use your paraprofessional or your library assistant in ways that we might not have time for. So with the understanding that some of us use parent volunteers and student volunteers, some of us have library professionals or professionals who are employees of the district. How would you suggest in the age of virtual libraries that we use our paras?
So my paraprofessional is amazing, and I'm very lucky to have her. And so what she has done, like I said before, she's been going in and helping with lunches. When we talk, she is still putting together book lists for future orders. She receives the updates when students or staff request books. And so she'll go on and sign those out to those kids. She has been going in and getting books to sign out. One of the things that she came up with that I can't even own her brilliance, is I asked her, what are you doing? Because I don't want her to become obsolete or dismissed or, I want to make sure her job is protected as well. And so we had one of our special ed teachers who works in the life skills program was looking for our picture books. And when I got on, I went on to our catalog and didn't log in as an administrator just to see what she could see. And I realized that she could not actually search for just picture books for whatever reason, however it was in the catalog. And so my para, when she was in the building, went and just took pictures of a bunch of our stacks. And she's been going into our catalog and redefining what our search terms look like, going in and looking for world literature books and, things that we know teachers are looking for, and just putting in different tags so that they are more accessible from home.
Well, and I think that I've seen some recommendations on Facebook conversations in library groups where if your circulation software is accessible remotely, that you can, sort of tighten up those records. You can delete certain records which are either redundant or they are, these are books that have been lost for more than 10 years. You can do some things from your or remotely to clean up your using your circulation software.
Absolutely.
So that's, I think, and you bring up a really good point. All of our library assistants are as vulnerable as the librarians when it comes to funding. And I know that we protect our librarian assistants' jobs because we recognize just how difficult our jobs would be without them.
Yeah.
So this is an important time to recognize that they have to be concerned about their job security as well. Yeah. So I appreciate you mentioning that. Strategy number 8, host weekly faculty meetups. And give us your piece of advice when it comes to doing this.
So at school, the library, I always say that if you put a desk between two people, you become a bartender.
I was a bartender. People come to you with problems. Absolutely.
Yes, I feel like an academic bartender, right? There are things that I know about my stuff that I probably should not know. People come and they talk to you and they problem solve, they share, they vent, whatever. But it is a place where oftentimes a teacher will come during their planned period if they need to get up and stretch, if they need just some social, another adult interaction. And I don't want to take that away. And especially now where we're so isolated. So for us, every Friday at 3:00, we have a library party. And, we'll have 10, 12 faculty members, just go to the Ask a Librarian link and show up in our session. And it's just a chance for us to catch up with one another, ask how we're doing. Sometimes we do talk shop about what worked or didn't work. Yesterday we vented about tourists who've come to our area. So it's personal, it's professional, but it's just a nice time to see faces that you may not have gotten to see all week, and to remember that we love each other and we're supporting each other.
Yes, I've heard this also referred to as a happy hour, and and libations are welcome. And if you happen to you don't have to hide that wine glass off screen. You can actually you can have that beer or that wine glass. And keeping in mind that there was always a sort of first Friday of the month, we're all getting together at a local watering hole, and that's gone too. Yeah. So even the socializing that we would have done just after hours, it's payday, or we wanted to go and get a drink, that's gone. Yeah. So this definitely addresses that, because it's not a staff meeting. Staff meetings have an agenda, right. And I like that your meeting doesn't have an agenda. Right.
No, just a hangout.
Your 9th strategy is one that I definitely know some people have mixed feelings about, and that is, it sounds simple, and that is to read. Mm-hmm. Librarians should be spending some of this time reading.
So, our job has many layers, but one of the things that we need to do is to be able to put that right book in that right kid's hands. And that is not going to change when we go back. And so use this gift of time to read. And so I'm reading books, but I'm also reading articles and that sort of thing. But I don't, I feel like we feel guilty if we read, but if you don't read, how can you do your job? Mm-hmm. You have to be a reader to be a high quality librarian.
I saw an interesting article in Vogue last week, and thanking a friend who posted it on this Facebook group. But during this particular time, our ability to concentrate has been challenged, but also our ability to allow ourselves this sort of luxury of reading when there are a lot of exterior stressors and things which pull at us in ways we could not have anticipated. Sometimes reading is an escape, but mentally we have to be in a place to allow ourselves to get there. Yeah.
And I know some days, so I have just built in 30 minutes a day. 30 minutes a day I will read. That's not a lot of time. We can all find that in our days. And I know sometimes I sit down and I open that book and my brain is going in 14 different directions. And sometimes I have to read that first page a few times, but eventually I hammer myself into the process. And it's a little bit of self-discipline, but it's also a lot of self-care.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And as the person who loves audiobooks, I have been putting an audiobook on when I'm walking my dogs and emptying the dishwasher and folding the laundry and making dinner and doing all those things, because right now, sometimes watching the news is incredibly distressing. I don't cut myself off from the news entirely, but in places where I would have listened to an informative podcast or watched the news, I'm now going to turn on a book for work, like a middle grade book or something that I'm listening to because it's a book I'm going to buy, hopefully. Is far more enjoyable. And I can feel my blood pressure coming down incrementally. For me, it's audiobooks just because it's an immersive experience. Your 10th strategy, and I'm going to say this, be very careful about overwhelming staff. I'm going to put /parents. Because depending on the age of your students, much of our communication at the elementary level goes first to the parents. And so we're trying our best to streamline. But do tell us when you are thinking about this 10th strategy, what are you thinking?
One of the beautiful things that has happened out of this, this tragedy and societal turning on its head is that all of these people have stepped forward and said, or all of these corporations have stepped forward and said, here is free access. We want you to be able to use our tools, our strategies, really paying honor to the work that we do as educators. And I am so grateful for that. However, it is also really overwhelming. It's a lot. And you could spend weeks just sort of sifting through these resources and we don't have the luxury of doing that because we still have students we need to teach. It is also really tempting as librarians, because we are researchers, because we want to put tools in the teachers and parents and students' hands, to just keep emailing them. And they are going to tune us out. So really try to keep your email to once a week. Really try to focus on small groups. Yesterday I found some great world language resources. And so I just emailed my world language teachers and they said, hey, Tuesday we have a department meeting. Why don't you come to that? And that's a great time for us to have it, and if it's really urgent, I'll say please read in the email subject. But we can't just send a list of 50 resources to every teacher in the building because they are being inundated and it's just not useful. So we need to bite our tongues, we need to hold back, and we need to just send out a little bit of information to a few people at a time to keep ourselves relevant and to help them best.
Wow. I'm going to let that be the last word. I really, I appreciate you offering to be the person who does this COVID episode, because when I read your article, I had not seen it encapsulated as nicely as you did. And I think you went through and addressed how we can become the leaders during this crisis. And I appreciate that it's an ambitious list, but what you didn't try to do was to bring all the resources together and sort of, I really do feel that the strategies you've given us in your article, we can all look at and sort of tackle one at a time and realize that there is potential. There's great potential for us as librarians to be leaders at this time. Angie Miller, I want to say thank you on behalf of the listeners who are tuning in today.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, stay well, and I look forward to our paths crossing in the future.
Thank you, Amy.
I am so grateful to Angie for being as accommodating with my request, because the turnaround for this particular episode was record time. I read her article and contacted her that very morning, and I think we had an episode scheduled right away. So she was very generous with her time and flexible with her scheduling, and I do appreciate that. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback, questions, and episode suggestions, either on Facebook, Twitter, or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, and it will have to be a home address as most of us are not returning to school for months, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. If you found this podcast helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. The topic of our next episode will be boosting circulation, and my conversations with Chelsea Graustra and Christina Zimmerman. I hope you will tune in.